are just a little bit behind schedule, but we're going to make sure that we dedicate enough time to these people. My name is Faith Newman. I'm a graduating senior in ethnic studies focusing on international community and human services with a minor in corrections. I work for Dr. Fagan. I'm the secretary of the North Central Region of the National Black Graduate Student Association and also the co-advisor to the Ethnic Studies Organization. So I feel really honored to be in a position to work on the committee for this and also to meet all people on this panel, but even more so to introduce the moderator, my mentor and one of my professors, Dr. Truesdale. She works for Mankato State University as a professor in corrections. She's taught me the correctional counseling and also juvenile delinquency. Yes, a whole bunch of things. And personally, so she's the perfect person to moderate for this. Me personally, I've been really involved in the recent events, even creating my own grassroots movement at MSU to deal with police brutality and everything else going on there. So I feel really special to be at this. And Dr. Truesdale will give a better synopsis of everything that's going on here. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Faith. This is such a pleasure because I'm always interested in hearing what our panelists in criminal justice have to say about work in the community. As you know, we've had some issues around the country in police brutality that affect minorities, particularly African American men. And I think our direction today is to examine or to inquire, maybe explore what it is, how they interact with the community, how they separate themselves as African Americans in a community that feels so hostile toward the criminal justice system. I'm interested in hearing about that, as many of my students have issues about it, want to have conversations about Ferguson, about the Garner case in New York. They want to have conversations about it. We've had conversations about multicultural competency. They can tell you, soon as Ferguson happened, you know, the first thing I did was reevaluate what I was teaching in correctional counseling, reorganizing my whole lecture content. I knew that I was teaching race issues, but I said, wait a minute, what I see wrong at this point in time are issues about multicultural competency. Why is it when we bring two communities together, the civic and the criminal justice system, there's always this tone of a place where we can't communicate effectively, okay? So that's one place where I would like to go. The other is, how then do we begin to educate our communities in terms of preparing them for this kind of interaction, but also to educate our police officers in terms of what we need to, what they need to do to prepare themselves for this kind of interaction, what it is. Because some people may be very good at it, perfect at it, have a good experience at it, regardless of their expertise. But some others may have some challenges, so we might want to, you know, help to educate in that way. The other thing is, how can we be proactive, make it a better place for our communities to move forward? We're struggling with that as a discipline, as a profession. We're struggling. And even with multicultural competency, and if those of you want me to explain it later, I can. But even with multicultural competency, you know, diversity training that they want to call it. I don't like diversity training. And the reason is, it just talks about the quotas, the numbers, the how many people. Okay, that's fine. We need that. That's like CJ 101. How then do we move to another level where we can engage in interaction? And it's not just the community knowing how to get engaged, or the criminal justice system knowing how to engage. It's an interaction that takes place between two people. That's the competency. How do you then be a participant in the outcome of this interaction that's taking place? Okay, so the question that I want to pose to the panel right now is, first I want you all to introduce yourselves, maybe tell them a little bit about how you got into the business of criminal justice, and maybe, you know, for educational purposes, what degree that you had, you know, tell them a little bit about yourselves first. I know our police chief from St. Cloud, he had an interesting story from the last time that I listened to his presentation, but we don't know much about the others, and you don't either. So tell them a little bit first about yourself and how you got into the force, why you got into the force. Want to start on that end?
I'll start on this end. Thank you for the invitation, first of all. My name is Blair Anderson, and I'm Chief of Police in St. Cloud. I am a transplant from the great state of Michigan. I was born and raised in Detroit. Went to the same high school as my man Charles Hallman right here, just at a different time. Back when Detroit was the murder capital of the whole world. And, you know, through a lot of intervention, good family support, good strong values, and the grace of God, I was able to get out of there. So I came here chasing my hoop dreams. I have a master's degree in public safety administration from St. Mary's, and I started as an intern in Dakota County. Worked my way up there, and been fortunate to have some good leadership and some good developers. Spent a year and a half at Carver County as the chief deputy. I was at Dakota for 15 years, and I've been in St. Cloud. It'll be 3 years this summer.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm Alice White. I'm a police officer with the Minneapolis Police Department. I've been with Minneapolis since 2004. I started as a community service officer, and I'm currently the East African liaison for a relatively new unit called the Community Engagement Team. I grew up in Minneapolis. I graduated from South High School, and I grew up in the city around a time when Minneapolis was considered Murderapolis. So my interest in law enforcement came from my uncle was a sergeant with Minneapolis, and also from my interaction with the police department growing up in the city of Minneapolis. It's that stereotypical, I didn't like how I was treated, how my friends were treated, so I decided to be the police officer that I would have liked to have encountered when I was growing up in the city.
I'm Charlie Adams. I'm a sergeant in the homicide unit for Minneapolis Police Department. I grew up in North Minneapolis, went to North High School, graduated from there. I have my master's from Concordia University in St. Paul. I had various jobs on the department. I was Mayor Sells Belton's driver for both our terms. So that was a very interesting experience working with her. One of the smartest ladies I've ever met, persons I should say. My interest in law enforcement is when I was in high school. I grew up in the projects in North Minneapolis, and our interaction with the police was just terrible. So I said I'm going to be a cop and try to make a difference, and hopefully I think I've made some difference, when it comes to being a police officer from Minneapolis. So.
Jerry Wallerich, Sergeant in the 5th Precinct Property Crimes. Did 12 years in the military, and then I became a police officer. Been a police officer for a little over 24 years. Worked uniform patrol in the 4th Precinct in North Minneapolis for 6 years. Uniform street sergeant for 7 years, and then a little over 10 years in the homicide unit. Worked on the SWAT team, mounted patrol. It's been a great experience for the past 24 years.
I'm Dennis Hamilton. I've been on the department for about 25 years. I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised there, and you all know that's a nice little quiet city. Came to Minneapolis. I was recruited up here by way of through Iowa. I went to school out there and played ball and stuff. So came up here and been a sergeant for about 15, 16 years. Internal affairs investigator. I was a school liaison coordinator for Northside Schools. As an officer, I walked the foot patrol out in North Minneapolis. I had a lot of interact. That's where I really got a lot of my foundation of learning to me about police work. But currently, I'm an investigator with Sergeant Wallerich and property crimes in South Minneapolis. It's been a very good experience being on the department. I had a lot of things I've done, a lot of diversity that I've dealt with. So I'm still learning, and I enjoy interacting with community like this.
Okay, great. All right, so let's begin our discussion. What are you doing in terms of strategic plans to build relationships with the community? I guess any one of you can get in, but I call her Christy Love.
Now some of the youngsters won't even know what that means.
I know, the old people laugh. When I was growing up, there was this show I used to love.
Teresa Graves.
Called Christy Love,
Right.
and she was a police officer.
Yeah.
So when I first met her, she had her gun in her holster, and she's been Christy Love to me. See, I can't even give her real name right because I've been calling her Christy Love in affection for her. So go ahead.
So for me, primarily right now, I work with the East African community, and one of the things that I do specifically to try to build with the new immigrant community that's here in Minneapolis is I've created a lot of different programs and groups for women and children that would engage them and teach them investigative process and civil rights and just criminal justice in a manner that they would probably have a better understanding being a new immigrant community. Also, with like the Northside residents, I've created a program called Conversations with Cops in Coffee Shops. So we just pop up at my unit, we'll pop up at a coffee shop, and I bring my laptop and we make ourselves available to the community in an organic way. It's nothing that I advertise. And interact with the customers that would automatically already be in that vicinity. That's been extremely successful. I've been contacted by other coffee shops that want that type of atmosphere in their business. So that's kind of the stuff that I'm doing currently.
So what exactly are you doing with this conversation? I mean, give us some insight on what takes place, how it happens, how does it happen?
So I have like a little stand that I put up on my table at the coffee shop, and it says Conversations with Cops. And I walk around the coffee shop and introduce myself to every patron. And I introduce myself, I introduce my unit, because like I said, it's a relatively new unit. There's 6 of us in the unit. I'm the East African liaison, there's a Black liaison, Asian, Latino, public housing and mental health, and Latino, did I say that? So there's 6 of us. And introduce my unit, and then people have questions. They have questions about Ferguson. They have questions about maybe a police report that they made that they might not felt like they had follow up on. They have questions about the body cameras. So it's just a natural environment that I can sit down with someone individually and give them immediate access to a police officer to answer just general questions that they might have. And like I said, I bring my laptop. So if they had, if they were involved in some form of criminal activity, they might want me to pull up their police report and see what it says in that police report. So I have access to that to be able to give that information to them.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to contribute to that? What are you doing in your community?
Well, I am also called man. We were minority recruiters for years. We hired one of the largest class of minorities ever in the history of this state. And we had 21 people of color. And HAM continued to bring minorities in. We started our CS Community Service Officer program, and that was very successful, helping us get kids of color in that program. We targeted first was Asian males because we had a lack of Asian males in our department, and that was successful for us bringing the numbers up. You know, not to the standards it should be, but at least we had some folks on there. Currently, my ideal with the community. I coach football at North High School with my son, and if y'all followed Minneapolis North football this year, you've seen that we went to the section finals of the state tournament. My son is a head coach, and he's also a police officer. And he took over that program when nobody thought North High was going to have a football program because they thought they were going to close the school. So I went up to one day just to help him look at some of the talent he had, and when I got there, he only had 8 kids. That broke my heart, because I played ball there. Used to have 50 kids, 60 kids on the field. So I couldn't turn my back on him, and I stayed and helped him develop the program that we have now. This year we've had probably 8 Division I players that come from our team. We have one that's highly recruited by Oregon and all the other schools. To say this, these are young men. A lot of these young men don't have fathers. We have to play the role of the father figure. But also we have to play the role of law enforcement too, because we have 2 or 3 who wants to be gang members. So daily we have to deal with those issues out there with them. You know, I have one kid I take right up under my wing, and I put put him right in the headlock when he's acting up. And I tell him every day I love him. But the gang influence is tough for us. One thing we discovered out there, we have had shootings around the school, but we have not had a shooting at the field. They know not to come up there and mess with the kids while they're playing ball. You know, so I think by me and my son being in it, sometimes you pass the field, we're in full uniform, standing out there, and the kids totally get it. They understand it, they respect it. You know, so that's what I have contributed to the community. And I've been in that program for all those years, and I've always funneled whatever I could do. When I was in Mayor Belton's office, in the police, whatever little program for kids, I always made sure North High was getting that program, because I knew we desperately needed that kind of support, you know, when we weren't getting it before. So that's what I personally do.
Okay.
Well, in St. Cloud, there's no shortage of initiatives. One of the things I found since I got there, it is no longer white cloud. And anybody that refers to it as that, I know they haven't been there for a while.
I never heard that about this, but
Well,
I understand.
they earned that reputation in the 80s. I mean, there were riots on the campus at St. Cloud State. But a lot of work has been done. We've got signed agreements with the African American Male Forum and about a dozen other advocacy groups that represent all of our ethnic immigrants. We have a community crime impact team. That's a sergeant and 3 officers, and they deal directly with advocates, community leaders, the imams in our East African community, and they help solve problems, small problems, before they turn into catastrophes. Simple things like parking during prayer creates a nightmare for the neighborhood. And then of course you always have the rednecks that come out, and I'm gonna give it to you straight with no chaser, and they couch their arguments. It'll be 10 pages, and it's not till you get to the last page that you get to what the issue really is, and it's them being there. So we utilize that community crime impact team. I run a youth leadership academy for at-risk boys every summer with my SROs, and we take a group of them to Camp Ripley for a week, and we drill them on everything from conflict resolution to table etiquette, you name it, and we continue to mentor them after we get them back home until they graduate from high school. With our East African community, to me it's critical that they have a point of contact. And so I use one of my CSOs as a community liaison, and this guy has done such wonderful work that they made him an honorary imam. And this is a white dude, about 60 years old. But he gets it. He's culturally competent, he's compassionate, and they don't hesitate if they're having an issue. They don't have to search around and get the runaround. There's one person that they can go to. And most importantly, and most recently, I sent 3 of my sergeants to Connecticut to do a train-the-trainer session on fair and impartial policing. We're hopeful that one day it'll be mandated by the Post Board. It's not yet, but we include that in our in-service training 3 times a year. It's a 6-hour training module, but we break it up, and it's just real simple. Everybody has biases, you bring them with you, but as long as you're aware of that and you don't let that drive your decision making when you're dealing with people that are different than you, you'll probably make better decisions and get better outcomes. And I can go on, but I'll yield the floor. We've got an engaged community in St. Cloud, and we don't want to mess that up. Last thing, after Ferguson, I was getting phone calls. Well, what are you going to do to make sure that doesn't happen here? And one of my most consistent answers was, first of all, St. Cloud police ain't murdered nobody. Last time I heard. And so let's not make a problem where there isn't one. We can have the discussions. We can explain practical application and why it's so important that we get compliance from you all. But let's not go storming City Hall, because we don't have that problem here. We might have some other ones. So let's address those. Let's talk about the issues, and let's keep that from happening. So we've done some community outreach meetings with NAACP so that we can get the dialogue started.
Okay, good. Anyone else want to add to that? Okay.
I just think it starts when you first come on the department. I remember as a young rookie on the department, right south of North High School, the vacant lot, 14th and Knox. We're still on rotating shifts. I stopped there playing baseball out in the park, in the vacant lot. Go out and play baseball with them for a couple innings. I get back to the precinct, one of the old timers goes, Jared, what the hell were you out there playing ball with those guys for? I said, maybe when we get my butt kicked someday, they'll help me out. And he's like, yeah, right. And I, what kind of person are you? Are you that person every day? And that's how you build the relationship with the community. It's just like the professor. What kind of reputation do you have as a professor? That's what we have. 24 years, 25 years, what kind of person have you been? And people remember that in the community. They will call you when they have information.
Well, I think that, and the reason that I asked that question is because we hear constantly this issue about community policing, but people don't really get, even in the professionals that want to push community policing, they don't understand how far that goes with the engagement. You can't just show up in the community and just trot around. You have to literally engage the community in a positive and influential way. You can't just walk around and drive through. We're community police. No, you're not. You control it. There's a difference between the two. Okay, so, go ahead.
Yeah, just like to piggyback on that. I had the opportunity to be one of the first community police officers that walked the foot beat in a number of years at Minneapolis in the early 90s.
Explain what foot beat is.
Oh, excuse me, that's foot patrol. It's not driving
you.
around. It's not driving around in the car. It's actually you out there walking a beat. And I had a pretty large area. And like I had mentioned previously, that was one of the ways that I really learned police work, because the community is you know, who you work with. That's your stakeholders. That's who really makes this thing go. And being involved in a number of different organizations at that time within the community and dealing with people, whether they were gang members, whether they were just regular people that lived in the community, it was tantamount. I also involved in recruitment, had an opportunity to be in charge of what they call a summer internship program for high school kids, where the Minnesota and the Hennepin County Bar Association had paid kids to work at various locations in the summertime. They'd work at law firms, accounting agencies, and things like that, so they can get a real understanding of what it's like to work in a profession. The first year we started was 50 kids from both North and South Minneapolis. We did a yearbook, and then I recruited during the next year. It grew to 100 kids, and then we had over 150 kids from just the inner city alone of students that took an interest in being involved in working. They had to do a resume. They had to do job interviews. So they had a lot of learning that they did, as well as getting paid. And I just thought that was one of the most significant things of young people, because a lot of times inner city youth, they get put in a category that all they want to do is play sports, all they want to do is do this. They're dynamic. I mean, you know, I heard a term from KMOJ radio station some odd months ago, and it said something about being frustrated geniuses. I totally believe in that concept. I mean, because I've seen it before and numerous times over the years. And as far as you guys are concerned, as the youth of our future, you know, frustrated geniuses is what you're going to be dealing with a lot of your youth out there. And I jump at the chance to be involved and be engaged when asked. You know, sometimes our jobs don't allow us to always go out there and do like Sergeant Adams is doing, which is remarkable. But sometimes we have to just do as much as we can with what we got.
Okay, good. Next, let's take it a step further. Just recently, Minnesota State University has been engaging in bringing the first police officer on our campus. And what we're seeing is a number of those things, you know, efforts being done across the country now. All right, so you no longer have what you call the troubled youth community that maybe you're experiencing, but what you do have is this intelligent community. Not to say that the other groups are not intelligent, that's not what I'm saying at all. What you have here is a scholarship community, a community that sometimes will engage in drug abuse, domestic violence. You will see some of the similar types of things, but it's a different type of climate. How then do you start to engage the police in a scholastic, create an environment with a group of students who are also scholars?
I'm gonna be the answer man, since in St. Cloud, we actually have 3 licensed police officers on the campus of St. Cloud State that they pay for. And so this trend, I think will continue, and we've actually spoken with your public safety people at Mankato, and I know they're getting tremendous pushback because we still do. And you know, the issue is simple. You know, I'm a practical guy. I'm from the Midwest, man. 2 and 2 is 4. It ain't never gonna be 5. And so try and keep things simple. College campuses are a microcosm of society at large, right? There's stuff that goes on there. It just does. There's stuff that goes on there. And for us, our campus, and it's our most visible partner in St. Cloud, but it's located in one of the oldest neighborhoods. And that neighborhood has gone from about 98% property ownership to 33 property owners. All the rest is rental. And so you get all of that residual from the campus, it permeates that neighborhood. And so it was important for us to get three officers on the campus, and before I put them out there, I stressed to them that I want them doing as much, if not more, outreach than enforcement. There's always a time and a place for enforcement, but I want them doing outreach. I want them visible. I want them engaging, having those conversations with faculty, with students, with student groups, with the student government. And so far, we just had our year-end report, and you know, the people who are paying for it are very happy with the services that,
But what
that
kind
they're
of
getting.
outreach is actually taking place?
Everything from crime prevention
Okay.
to personal safety, you name it. A lot of times we let them drive some of those discussions. What is it that you're not getting from us? I don't mind asking that question, and when they tell us, we deliver.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to offer that?
Well, there's a program that I'm working with South High School through their Black Student Association. It's called Emoja, and we've created a program called Investigator for a Day. So you're working with an intelligent group of students, and they're interested in understanding investigative process, but not from a classroom setting, from a hands-on setting. So that's why I created this program where the kids will be set up, and we'll create a mock crime scene where they come in and investigate the crime scene. So they'll understand what it's like to be a law enforcement officer from the beginning of a 911 call down to, you know, arraignment of a suspect.
Very good. All right, so taking those thoughts into consideration, one of the biggest issues that some of the campuses have said is that enrollments have gone down as a result of having police officers on campus. There was research that had shown that. What is your response to that?
I want to address that because, you know, even in hearing rumors in Minneapolis public schools, they want to take law enforcement officers out of the school. We've always had a liaison in our school in Archive from Leo Johnson back in the days.
That's right.
You know, my brother Tony Adams was a liaison. I mean, I think we need to, they try to say it impacts students' ability to achieve, which I don't think is true. You know, I just look at the work that our officers in our schools put in to make sure that's a safe environment, and we're taking safety out of it when we remove officers. Even though officers are there and they're engaging with the kids, and trust me working up in North all the time, you get a lot of information engaging with the kids. But you know, we're not thinking about safety. It's kind of interesting, you look at like Minneapolis public schools, we never really had a school shooting inside the schools. You know, we haven't because we got officers in there. If you look at Red Lake, when they had the shooting up there at Red Lake, they had an officer, but it was a security guard without a gun. You know, sometimes we got to stop. We wouldn't need our kids protected. I would hate for my child, but he goes to Mankato now, so.
Amen. Amen.
The police officer gonna be there
Yeah,
soon.
so, you know, I like the fact there's a police officer there because I know I feel safe now knowing that you know they'll have officers in there. Because, you know, somebody comes in there, they're deranged, they want to kill somebody. We look at all these school shootings, and that happens. And a lot of time, law enforcement's not there to take out the threat, you know. So do we want safety for our kids, or do we just don't like the stigma of law enforcement there? We got to make up our mind.
Well, and a lot of times on campuses, and I have to say this more times than I would like, but I continue to. I've heard from faculty, from students that, well, you know, it makes us feel like we're occupied, you know, like we're living under martial law. Well, that's absurd to me, number one. But to piggyback on Sergeant Adams' claims, a lot of times the people who are creating chaos on the campuses have nothing to do with the school or the university. They don't go to school there. They don't want to go to school there. They don't even live around there. But there's some easy targets on college campuses, especially in Minnesota. You get a lot of folks that come from outstate, from small towns, and our biggest problem right now in St. Cloud, I call them crimes of opportunity. They leave the door not unlocked, but wide open, and leave for the weekend with all their valuables on the table, their iPod, their iMacs, everything. And they're shocked when they come back and that stuff is gone. And so we actually carved a beat within the beat where the college is, and so our officers are not restricted to the campus itself. We carved a little bit of a beat out of the actual 12 beat. That's where the university is in our city. And they patrol the campus and in and around the surrounding neighborhood, because a lot of students are living off campus as well. So,
well, then how do you, one of the biggest things that I've thought about and some others have thought about, how then do you select the best person to go into the high school or go on the college campus? Because my girl Christy Love, she shows up at the Pan-African conference every year. I've been here for like going on 11 years. How long have you been coming here?
It's only been 4 years.
She's been coming a long time. Okay, so when you look at the people that are standing and sitting in front of you, obviously I'm seeing cultural competency. People who want to be engaged. How do you select the right person to go into a high school or junior high school or college campus?
I'd like to jump on that one. I was a coordinator with the Minneapolis Public Schools North Side, and actually I worked with Tony Adams, Charlie's brother. And I can tell you, the personalities that it takes, how do we select is, number one, is the people who had a desire to do it. I mean, like, let's take Charlie's brother, Tony. Tony grew up there. He knew the kids. They knew him. He had a great relationship with that community and with the faculty and everyone. And so when he chose to be there, I mean, that was a no-brainer. And a lot of the other officers that had a desire to do it, that actually did a good job. There was Officer Roos. You had, Officer Rich Jackson. There was a number of them that I could name that, they were very competent when it came to the high schools because they had the experience out there, and it worked wonderfully. Because like Chief Anderson said, there's a time for law enforcement, but the most important thing is the interaction, the daily interaction, and that's what really set things in motion. Dealing with the elementary kids, the kids in junior high, and those type of things, you have to have patience. I know for the first 2 or 3 months when the school year would start, I would never wear a uniform. They always thought I was like either assistant principal or something. Then one day I'd show up in a uniform and go to all the lunches, and then they'd be surprised that I was like a police officer. But at that time, I was like, I got you.
Then they scared it like roaches.
I got you because now you see me as a person first. Now it's hard to just say this, I'm just that cop. It's like, no, you see me as a person, but because that's what I wanted to appear, is that I'm a person that does police work as a profession. It is a profession, and it's about, so that's how we wanted to select. Is number one, what we did here was look for the students that had the officers that had the desire to do it,
and don't just place anybody over there.
Oh yeah, because that wouldn't work.
Okay.
And you got to be like Chief Anderson here. He understands who he needs to put in these schools. Such as our administration, we have administrators who now get it, this current administration, who knows that they're just not going to stick anybody in there, because we have to get the right folks in the right schools. We have white officers who are from Roosevelt and South. They know they want to work their schools, you know, so they get it, they interview for us, the interview process. It's just not like it used to be in the days, hey, you can go over to that school, I'm gonna select you and put you over at school. No, you have to interview for that now.
Right,
So,
good. All right, so let me go ahead and open it up for the audience to get engaged. You want to start first?
Sure. My name is Peter Hayden. I have a program called Turning Point. We work with men and women who have a chemical health problem, mental health issue, and some other things. But I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One, and this pertains to not you, Chief, because you just came here, but the other brothers. We've always
and
had.
sister.
We still have always had African American policemen, Red Presley, even back to Mr. Kaufman, way back in the day, and so there's a legacy there. And I would, this is a statement. I would hope that we some kind of way start dealing with that legacy of African American policemen when we didn't have the problems, and no one would dare shoot a policeman, so that's the first thing. Second thing is, I want to ask y'all, is that with this gun law, I was coming out of the show the other day, dude had his, a European man had his arm all around his girlfriend, wife, or whatever the case is, made sure the gun was all out. I would be concerned if that had been me with a gun, even though the law says that I can do that. What kind of training are y'all giving, and things of this nature, if people decide they want to wear their gun out and they happen to be an African American, and the way we get shot, I just want to know, is there any kind of training?
It's interesting you say that, because there is an African American gentleman that walks downtown with his Glock fully exposed. And he keeps walking by me where I'm directing traffic on a ramp that I'm walking, and I'm just like, man, I know this brother's got to be getting stopped, But I know there's been guys who challenged, white guys who challenged our officers down there because they can do that. They don't have to conceal it. And so when we stop them, we end up in a lawsuit and complaints and all that stuff. So, but I keep seeing this brother, I'm like, man, come here, I gotta talk to you. I said, man, how many times have you been stopped? He said, man, your boys have stopped me all the time, but now they know who I am, Nice young man, because he wanted to challenge the law. But I'm like, man, I'm glad nothing happened to you. But then if you remember a couple months ago at Walmart, the brother was walking in, the guy puts his gun in, he's walking into Walmart, and some white guy comes up and starts beating the crap out of him. Yeah. Thinking that he was going in there to rob it. And the guy had permit to carry. So here's a citizen jumping him. I try to keep my stuff covered, and I'm the police, and I have to. But I mean, I have to be very cautious when I put it on, because you never know. You get that 911 call, and our guys are responding, and with all the rookies out there now, they don't know who I am, so you got to be very cautious as a cop, I think, period. So,
I want to tackle your first issue when you said I just got here. I've been here 30 years, brother. Okay. I've been a cop for 20. Okay. I've lived here longer than I lived in my hometown. And so when you talk about the legacy, there are more than 10,000 police officers in the state of Minnesota, less than 200 of color. There are a lot of reasons for that, and we're trying to address some of them. Some of the programs that we know worked in the past, like POCOP, which is an old program where police departments would recruit and guarantee a job to someone as long as they had a 4-year degree. Didn't matter what it was in. And then they would send them all through skills together. And if they passed the training, like we all have to, they already had a job. And so the forward-thinking people, like the ones I worked for, knew that ethnic diversity was important, but let's keep it real. The only reason some of these cities were starting to recruit people of color is because they got sued over the standardized test they were using, if you guys remember that, back in the 90s. Well, I interviewed the guy who wrote the test, and his control group was white guys from bedroom communities between the ages of about 19 and 35. And so if you guys think back to the 80s and into the 90s, what did most police departments look like? Now keep in mind that 200, once we take Minneapolis and St. Paul out of the equation, there's about 60 or 70 of us sprinkled all over the rest of the state. And it's going to require some legislation, I think, because as long as our certification is part of MNSCU, you guys aren't going to like this, it's a money grab, as far as I'm concerned, because you all put more people in these programs that ever have a prayer of getting a job, because you can't screen them up front, lest they sue you, right? It's no different than them wanting to be an accountant. You can't tell them, well, you can't go into law enforcement. But on the back end, as a hiring manager, when I see them, and I try and intervene, if I see them soon enough, and I know that they've got a felony theft conviction, go do something else. You got 5 DUIs, don't waste any more of your money. And so I'm recruiting hard, trying to get some folks of color into this profession. I don't care if they come to St. Cloud or not. But historically, the folks who met the qualifications in Minnesota, who had a college degree, were doing other things. They never thought about this as a viable career option. And so we gotta catch them younger. I used to recruit them in high school. Now I'm going to middle school now. So.
Well, I think part of that recruitment, I used to do a pre-college program in corrections. And one of the reasons why I started it at MSU when I first got here is because when you looked at the data, only 1% of African American were getting their PhD. And when you break that down by discipline, it gets even smaller, okay? Everybody wants to do research on criminal justice people, okay? And then start talking about African American and Hispanic people. But they're not people that look like them that are putting out that research. And when I started my PhD program, there were only 15 African American women in the entire country that were criminologists. And I knew 3 of them. One was at Howard when I was there. So when I that's why I have such affection for Christy Love over here. So my whole point is that if you want to kind of like change that, you have to engage them in certain types of, just like you're doing community policing and engagement, you have to do it in the same scholastic way. Because never in my wildest dreams did I thought that there would only be 15 African American women who are criminologists.
But before we even get to that point, we've got to convince younger folks that look like us that this is a viable option.
And tell them what those options are other than to carry a gun.
Oh my God, this is the greatest job in the world, you guys. Short of flying jet planes, which is what I wanted to do when I was a kid. This is the best job in the world. What do you want to do? Do you want to intervene in the lives of young people that look like you and have an impact on them? Well, you get to do that. Do you want to help people when they're at their worst? I don't hire people if they've never volunteered. I throw their applications in the trash. And the reason I do that is because clearly they're selfish. If you've never done something for someone who can do absolutely nothing for you, you're not going to be as effective at this job. So what do you want to do? You want to be a detective? Do you want to investigate homicides? And let me tell you something, and I'm not being obsequious. If anybody that I love was ever murdered, I want him, because he going to find them. He's going to find them.
Well, you pay him right, he'll come to St. Cloud.
He's going to find them.
Hey, with the last chief, you trying to find me, I'm going to put there with the last chief.
But I mean, you know, what do you want to do? And now we're technologically advanced now. I mean, I've got an officer that I took off the street and made him our technical liaison, because this dude is brilliant with computers and technology and figuring out applications for us. So he probably never thought he would get to do that earlier in his career. So it's limitless, you guys.
But I think you have to, beyond, I think there's this cloud of understanding here. With young people, and this is just from where I sit as a professor, for young people, when you're working with students of all ages, one of the biggest challenges is seeing what that career or that discipline offers them. So they'll say, okay, if I major in criminal justice, well, what all can I do besides be a police officer? They need to see that. They need to see what that is. Because I get the same questions for corrections. But what can I do other than be a correctional officer? I said, well, if you have a business degree, you can still work in a correctional facility. If you are educated, you can still work in a correctional facility. They need to see what those possibilities are beyond carrying a gun.
All right, let me give them a timeline then. I started as an intern. I got promoted to sworn officer after a year was up. I worked in the courts. I was at the sheriff's office. I worked as a bailiff for a few years. And then I went to patrol. And then I went to narcotics. And I got promoted to sergeant. And then I was a supervisor of investigations and fraud at the same time. And then I went back to the streets. Then I got promoted 2 more times and I was a captain. And then I went and ran the jail as the assistant jail administrator, and then I got promoted to commander. See all these blessings, but all these assignments. I was on the SWAT team. I worked boat and water patrol in the summer sometimes. I worked snowmobile patrol one time. Enough of that. The reason why we shoot ball, we go indoors in the wintertime. See that craziness with all that weather for them Europeans, man. It's too damn cold out there. And so then I went back to the jail as a jail commander, and guess what? Now I'm an implementer of policy instead of an instrument of someone else's. And from there, chief deputy to chief. So I mean, guys, it is. It's whatever you want to do with it. When somebody gives you the opportunity, take it.
You know, in Minneapolis, we have so many different things you can do.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're going to work the streets for probably about 5-6 years.
And you
But
should.
You should. Because you're going to learn it. Then all of a sudden, I'm going to be saying, you know, 5 or 6 years, it's time for you to take that promotional exam. I don't want to do that, man. I love the streets. You know, then we have to force these guys to take the promotional exam so they can now be a sergeant and come in investigations. And they get investigations like, you ought to tell us it was like this, you know, because now you're your own person. You're investigating crimes. You're doing all this stuff. One thing, because we worked in homicide together, you know, one thing is to get an outcome, to get a person to confess about doing a murder, because you know, murder is murder, but you get somebody to confess, and you can go back and tell that family and give them closure. That means so much. It means so much. We don't work for the police department. We work for God.
Right.
And I tell them that all the time.
Right.
But it gives us such a feeling. We know where we could have had closure to the family. And the reason why I say that, my uncle was killed back in the 70s. And a typical murder book is probably like this, Jerry, if not more. Big. This was his murder book. And when I pulled it, when I got up there.
Wow.
And all I had to do was look at 2 pages, and I knew that his wife had did it.
Woo.
And there was some information in there. She was involved in a murder that we never knew as a family prior to that. But I had an opportunity to tell my grandmother that story before she passed, and before my mom passed, she knew the story. So I'm just telling you, you can make a difference coming on the police department. You may not know what your role is. I'm gonna be a SWAT guy. I'm gonna be a SWAT guy. I got on SWAT. I'm like, man, I did not like this. And I was an entry guy. We're coming in. I mean, but then all of a sudden, I go to the mayor's office. They want me to be a driver. I said, I don't want to drive the mayor. Best job I ever had. You know, besides working in homicide. But I met a lot of people. So you don't know what you can do until you get in those positions.
Whatever you want to do. You want to be a canine handler. We got dogs. You want to ride horses.
Okay.
My name's Obi Kipper. I'm in the legal field. I've represented police as far as personal injury. I have a question for you, my brother. How did you end up in St. Cloud as a chief, knowing the history? And I think the students need to hear that. Because when I was going to school at the Harvard of the Upper Midwest, Mankato, it was one of the most redneck communities I've ever known to Minnesota. And all of a sudden, when you got hired, we rejoiced. Then we prayed because we was hoping you'd survive. So I see that you've done an excellent job, and congratulations. But maybe you can share with some of these folks what it's like, because, I mean, I got to admit, I never thought in a million years I'd see anything black in the police department, much less the chief.
Well, here's the deal, and so I have to go back a little bit. I'm from the D, and so for me, it was not unusual that everybody in positions of power looked like me, first of all, whether it was the mayor, the city council, the fire chief, the police chief, and so that wasn't a shock for me, right? That was the norm. for folks here in Minnesota, particularly our white brothers and sisters, they get to see themselves in positions of power all the time. And there aren't a lot of us. There hasn't been, certainly proportionate to the number of folks of color that live here. So here's how I got there. Because nobody, and I mean nobody, defines who I am. I do. Stereotype me all day long, think what you will, think what you want, but see, my dad, who just passed away, was a pro football player. My mother is this big. My father was the diplomat, the enforcer.
Okay.
Didn't repeat herself, and I get it now because she had 7 kids. There was no chaos. Before her lips stopped moving, you better be doing what she said do. And you better do it right. And we didn't get gold stars for trying hard. Well, that's wrong. I've been wrong damn ways. Go back. Right? And so that's how I was raised. And so when I came here, don't think I didn't have challenges. Don't think I didn't have obstacles. Don't think I haven't put, I mean, my house was firebombed when I lived in South St. Paul by a bunch of neo-Nazis. Right? Because I had a German wife and 2 little swirly babies, and they didn't like that. Yep, I said it. I can call them my little twist cones. They're grown men now. That's what they are. Love them to death. So there were challenges. Hell, I got felony stopped on Brooklyn Boulevard in 71st when I was a captain. Dragged out of my car at gunpoint. And when the guy walked up to me close enough to hear, because I had done it a million times, I'm like, dude, my service weapons in my back, my ID is in my back pocket. Yeah, just shut up, man, until I, oh, okay, Brooklyn Center.
Yep.
And when he pulled my wallet out and saw it, he said, shit. I said, you ain't even close. Take these damn handcuffs off me. But here's the thing, and then I had a conversation with him. You know, what if my son was driving my car, right? Because you thought you were going to be officer of the month, because I shouldn't be driving this car through here, right? I said, well, what if my son was driving? What if he panicked, right? And I mean, they had Brooklyn Boulevard in 71st block. There was 20 squads, and I knew what was coming. What if it was some other guy who was tired of being a frustrated genius and decided I've had enough? Somebody's going to get killed. So when I called his chief and found out he was already under investigation for racially profiling, I'm like, why the hell you got this guy on the street still? You could get somebody killed. So that's a really long answer to tell you. I don't take shit from people, from nobody. So that's how I got there. And with a whole bunch of blessings and with a whole bunch of good development, I happen to work for the only guy who's been sheriff in 3 counties.
Don Goodmanson.
Imagine what that takes, because that's an elected position.
Yeah.
And Don Goodmanson is a brilliant guy, knows how to run a police department, but he gets it. And one of the things he always tells people is, well, the question is always asked, can blacks police whites? Of course they can, but nobody's ever given them an opportunity.
Amen.
Right? And so that's the kind of guy who raised me as a cop. And he's a good teacher, he's a good mentor.
Thank you.
And then I asked Chief Finney, and then I'll shut up.
I graduated with Finney.
I asked Chief Finney before I took the job, while I was looking, and I said, you know, what should I look for? You know, what? He said, find a place that has some problems you can solve, and you'll be just fine. He's right.
He had a sweet squad car too, brother. I was in it. On the right side. You got a nice one too back in the day, brother.
You have some more questions? I have
Oh.
2. Go ahead.
My name is Hannah. I live in Mankato, and I have a 15-year-old son that aspires greatly to be in law enforcement.